Welcome back to the Darius Gant Show. I'm your host, Darius Gant, as well as the founder and CEO of Tesoro AI, where we help companies to build AI solutions and AI teams. On this podcast, we focus on cutting-edge technology, specifically artificial intelligence, as well as the founders and executives who are laying it all on the line to bring this technology to you in the real world. If you've seen previous episodes and you enjoyed them, be sure to subscribe. We're on all your favorite platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. So please do subscribe. And if you learned something, make sure you give us a thumbs up or that 5-star rating. Today's guest, I'm sure you're gonna love. We sit with Satadru Sengupta, who is the founder and CEO of a company called Dobby. Dobby is supported by some very well-known accelerators, one being Techstars, the other being Plug and Play. They also raised $1.7 million in a seed round and are backed by some very prominent investors. Dobby is bringing artificial intelligence to an area most of us don't think artificial intelligence sits, into home maintenance, the residential property market. What I like about Satadru is he has a very unique experience in that he's both an AI founder now, so he's seen the practical application of AI to his startup, but he's also seen it on the enterprise level. Satadru was one of the first employees and became general manager at an AI startup, which has now become a unicorn, Data Robot. He helped grow that group from 25 employees up to 800. He also has experience at another enterprise, which I'm sure you're familiar with, AIG. At AIG, he led global distribution analytics. And lastly, Satadru was also a data scientist at Liberty Mutual. So be prepared for Satadru to speak to AI in the enterprise and as a startup, and how we can think about its application and how to build these AI applications in both settings. If you are an AI founder or executive rapidly scaling your business, be sure to check out the team at Tesoro AI. With our top data scientists, machine learning engineers, and data analysts, we're able to help you move forward more quickly on your AI initiatives. So, whether it's data labeling, AI strategy, software development, or staff augmentation, we've got a strong team that has your back. Head over to www.tesoroai.com. All right, without further ado, let's hop into the show and hear from Satadru. Thank you for joining us today, Satadru.
Thank you so much, Darius. So it's such a pleasure to be here today.
Absolutely. And what I want to kick things off with, because I think you have a very interesting background, right? You had an opportunity to see AI from both an enterprise and a startup perspective. So I would love to get learn more about your background, get some of your initial thoughts, and maybe where we can start is thinking about, building an internal AI team and then how that expands out into a larger organization as you move the capabilities into the periphery.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's always great to start from the very beginning. And I was very lucky to be in the, in early days in the data science and predictive modeling, predictive analytics space. And I'm originally from India, and after completing my master's in statistics, I got a job at GE Insurance, General Electric. They used to have an insurance unit, and that is the first time I got to see that you can actually apply statistics and probability in insurance space. So I got interested, and I pursued actuarial science, and then I started at Deloitte in the data science practice, again focusing on insurance, and then Liberty Mutual and AIG. And at AIG is the first time I applied machine learning and to solve very complex problems. And then eventually I worked at Data Robot, where we built an AI platform. So the learning, if I really summarize, there are three different phases that we have seen. In the first phase, data scientists, at that time we used to call them statistician. Before, in 2011, Drew Conway first coined the term data science. And so what used to happen is that there's this elite group of people who would be doing predictive analytics as a group of 10 people and solving one or two strategic problems. So that was the case at Liberty Mutual. I was part of the pricing team where I will be applying generalized linear model to solve how to calculate premium for auto insurance or home insurance. So that's back in 2007, 8, around that time period. But at the time, I joined AIG, it changed. What AIG did very strategically, that they created a huge organization of data scientists, management consultant, and behavioral economists and science team. And they basically try to bring data science much faster and in a much more pervasive manner, right? But did that by building a world-class team. Like, you may call it center of excellence, but it is more like embedded within the organization, reporting directly to the CEO, has way more leverage than traditionally what we have seen in the usual COE type of organization. So that's the second phase. So the first phase, few people would be doing at the corner of the organization. Second phase, you are still sitting with the human experts, and they are trying to, but in a much more larger scale, like, with a huge investment, you are trying to build it like, much more faster. What Data Robot did, like, Jeremy Achin, and Tom DeGodoy, they were the founders, co-founders of Data Robot back in 2012. They understood very early on that data science and AI would be everywhere. So they essentially built a horizontal platform or horizontal AI, which anyone can use, data scientist or quantitative-minded business analyst, and they can bring data science to the organization with an augmentation between human and a platform. Right? So that's the third phase that we see that now what they really helped us with, you can solve a problem in sports analytics, you can solve a problem with one of the largest banks, you can also solve with the federal government in the public sector, right? So that's the power of horizontal AI, and that's what they did. So that's kind of the journey, I think, that was pretty fascinating to me.
Yeah, and what I'd love to learn more about is, as you think about your experience at AIG, where you're establishing that, center of excellence, right? There's, this whole process where the first thing you need to do, and correct me if I'm wrong about how you all approach this, but you're really making sure the data that you need in order to eventually deploy AI solutions is there, and you're organizing the data, and you're making sure you have the right data. And then there's this decision behind what are the applications that we deploy. Would love to learn more about how you decided as an organization what applications get deployed and which ones come first.
Yeah, no, terrific question. So at AIG, it was the first time I became a manager, right? So I was part of the founding team. When I joined, it was 5 people, the science team. By the time I left, it was 150 people. But one thing that senior managers did very early on, the leadership of the science team, is that also creating a data team, right? And there are 2 components, not just data, but also solving the right problem with the right people. Like you can solve a data science problem any day. It's so easy with a platform, or if you're a talented statistician or data scientist, but there is no use of that model if no one uses that model, right? So you have to really work with underwriters and pricing actuaries and claims analysts. You have to really work with the business people, front-end people who would be actually using your model for their day-to-day decision making. So 2 things that we really focused on early days is that how can we make sure that they are involved, the people who are user of our model, they are involved in the process. And in turn, they would be the people who would be helping us with the data. Because in a large complex organization, which never thought about, all this started very rapidly. So AIG, when it started, never thought, okay, there would be an AI one day, so let's start collecting the data. So data would be messy. Dobby, in my current company, it's a very different story. We know about the technology starting with, so it's a very different architecture. So what you have to really do, you have to work with business, you have to use their help to define your data, to make sure the data, you have accumulated, organized, and transformed your data in a way that can be digested by your AI model. So that's how we spend time. So 2 things I would highlight here. Number 1 is to really work with the business folks and involve them in the data organization and data definition process. And number 2, have some dedicated resource, just solely work on the data before you start any model.
Absolutely, absolutely, which makes your life a lot easier. And what I'm very curious about is, you have various business units, and I imagine they're seeing the center of excellence being created, and they're saying, wow, AI, well, it could be 2 situations. One could be them saying AI is going to replace me, but the other thing is, are they saying, look, our company is about to deploy this awesome technology. We as a business unit want to be able to leverage it. I want to be the first to use the application, right? So, as an organization, there are tons of things that you could create. How does one decide, here's what we should approach, here's what we should tackle, here's the use case we should tackle first?
Another terrific question, and I often talk about this thing, when we bring AI or data science or any new technology in a large organization, right? We have to be very careful how we create what I call portfolio of use cases. and how we prioritize that portfolio, like which one to tackle first. Oftentimes, like, I mean, if our objective is not decision making, or make our, like, if our objective is not driving profit, or like, avoiding losses by applying AI or data science, and if our sole objective is to just create a kind of, praise, then we can always,
science project.
have a science project, like, then you can have a moonshot goal all of a sudden. But I strongly believe that we should take a very pragmatic approach there, because what I learned very early on, because I was so involved with business, is that it's always good to, if you're like, if you're not making profit, it is always good to make profit first. But if you're already making profit, there is not much value by increasing that by 1% or 2%. You should really think very pragmatically, what is the hair on fire problem that you have, and you should tackle that. And number two is taking an iterative approach. So one thing that we also do with at DataRobot, I had the opportunity as a general manager to work with hundreds of organizations, small, medium, large. And one thing that we always did is what we call iterative approach, that you take few problems and you take your most important problem, and you don't wait for 6 months to solve it, even if your data is messy. The fascinating thing about this kind of platform, like, DataRobot kind of automated platform, is that you can run an iteration very quickly. And you run the iteration with a complete consciousness, understanding that results would be wrong. But from that wrong results, you will learn a lot of things, that why the results is wrong, because the data was wrong. Okay, now I go back and fix the data. Now I rerun again, and now I get a better result. So this calibration process is very important, as opposed to, okay, we are working on a big project and meet us after 6 months.
Yeah.
Because after 6 months, you may discover something that will undo everything that you did. And it's very, very bad idea strategically. So that this is how we choose the use case very wisely, where you have a biggest impact for the business. And number two, use an iterative process so that, you have a continuous validation going forward.
Yeah, yeah. And I can imagine there are scenarios where you do see a use case where, look, this could, I'm just going to throw numbers out here.
Please, yeah.
This could increase our profit margin by 10%, right? But deploying that product could take a year. In my mind, the C-suite's not going to wait a year. So how do you balance that need to show results with near-term results, right, with the necessity to have impact?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is kind of a very, very important topic, that, how we continue our business as it is with the existing technical stack. I'm talking about the larger companies now. And then at the same time, how we continuously innovate, right? And then the second component is basically oftentimes requires hacking. Hacking means, I can give you a very specific example. One of the models I built at AIG was built with statistical language called R. And it was one of the very used machine learning techniques. This is back in 2012, and called GBM. And so it was a very good work, statistically speaking, machine learning wise. But when we build the model, we realized that the legacy system that we have that cannot implement our model. And what we really did, we use something called metaprogramming to transform that to that legacy programming language. So it is essentially a pure hack that we did to make it happen. And in a continuous process, what we're doing, we're basically showing the result to the senior managers that if we do that heavyweight or lightweight, whatever way you want to see it, there is an enormous value of doing that. I always say that you will be successful in a new technology if you have a sponsorship from the top. Right? You cannot really do it as a science project, as you said. It has to be a strategic priority for the senior management or the senior leadership. Only then you'll be able to see the results.
Right, and you have to have a way to actually show that you're delivering on some metric, right? That there's
on some metric.
Made on some metric.
Absolutely, and hacking actually is very important here. You cannot just say, "Oh, I work at AIG and I'll be complaining about I don't have a Google-like system," right? No, you will never have Google-like system, because Google started with that system, and that's what they do. But when you work in the financial side, right now I'm in a very unsexy industry, very legacy industry, home maintenance, and we are the only company where the CEO is coming from AI and data science background. Everyone else is coming from traditional property maintenance background. So these things are very, very important, that how we think about kind of given the resources we have, how we innovate. Yep.
Okay, great. So that's a great segue into Dobby. You yourself started out with a background in artificial intelligence. And, there's a number of ways you could have gone in terms of the startup that you chose to create, the market you chose to serve. So I'm curious how you identified the particular pain point. Well, let's talk about the pain point, but then how you identified that AI is the right solution for this.
Yeah, I think this would be my favorite question at the end of the day after the interview. Basically, we are in a very exciting time, right? One of the luckiest generations. And because we have seen so much things that were developed in the last few decades, primarily in the last 1 decade. And so one thing that happened when I was at Data Robot, I got a front seat for the horizontal AI, that how quickly we can bring this technology to different industries. And like many people you talk to, industry investors and experts, they'll be saying AI has infinite TAM, total addressable market. So much application. But then the question becomes, again, prioritization of global portfolio. That what is the highest value? Where do I have the biggest value? And turned out that as we bring horizontal AI to vertical AI, there is this whole lot of industries like legacy industries, unsexy industries, where we don't see any data scientists are working, right? So, and good people always try to escape competition. They don't get into the competition.
Yeah.
So what we really did very strategically, and it's a very high utility problem also, that we identified a $400 billion industry, which is home maintenance upgrade. That's the amount of money people used to spend in home maintenance. Why I'm saying used to, because our home maintenance went up by 40% with stay-at-home economy. People are staying longer at home. So that number will become around 500 or 600 billion this year. So 500 billion would be a better estimate. Now, with that, if we look at that industry has no digitization. What we have, all the innovation that happened was 10, 15 years old. We have Angie's List, we have Thumbtack, we have Porsche, and all these companies, they're great companies, but they started at least 10 years ago. And if you look at those companies, what they solved a very meaningful problem, which is they created an online marketplace. They're selling leads. If you are the homeowner there is, then what will happen? You submit a request that gets sold to multiple service providers in your area, like electricians or plumber, whoever is needed. And all of them are actually paying Angie's List and so on. After that, you'll be choosing one of those people. You'll be taking interview. This is your project now as a homeowner, and you'll be spending enormous time, and it is hit or miss with those people, right? And then you have to be the project manager throughout that process. So there is no get job done or productivity software in this space, and there is no digitization or real AI. So that's what we have seen actually, and that's the opportunity or competitive opening that we saw, and that's where we started Dobby. So Dobby is fully it's a AI-driven, a get job done software. So what we do really, we work with high quality service providers only, and we create an invite only kind of service provider group, like electricians, plumber, handyman. And they created 2 core applications, one application for them, service providers, one application for homeowners. And this is basically a productivity platform, which is making the communication super efficient, asynchronous. So you don't have to chase your homeowner, chase your service provider. You can, at your convenience, you can communicate. It's extremely data rich. You can communicate a lot of images, videos, etc. It has everything is digital. The payment would be done super fast and fully digitally. Just to put a side note, this 400 billion economy has no digital payment. So we created the first digital payment integrated system, and we also have 24 hours guaranteed payment to the service providers. Huge value to them, because otherwise they get paid in 5 to 15 days. So things like that. So you really don't see all the good things that you say, wow, it is still not there. Yeah, it is still not there because these are unsexy industries, these are legacy industries. In our day-to-day, we are not solving those problems. In our day-to-day, we love to solve banking problem, insurance problem, or health problem. So that's kind of how it all started.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people can relate to being homeowners. So I think this is a very, very relevant example. Maybe even to bring it home or to better conceptualize what Dobby is, what Dobby does, can you share a couple of examples of how the system, how it's actually used by, on the homeowner side and then on the service provider side?
Absolutely. So everything we do at Dobby, small or big, is focused on 2 areas. Number one, how we can increase the value of your home, or because it's oftentimes your largest asset, or how we can give you a luxury experience as a homeowner. right? So these are like, either these two or like one of them or both of them. Like everything that any one of us are doing, like is very clear. Like if you are not doing something that is not geared towards like, home as an asset and home ownership as an experience, we're not solving the right problem.
Okay.
So these are the two core focus areas if we think internally. Now, what homeowners are getting, what service providers are getting. Homeowners have their home in their pocket, essentially. So anytime, you cannot predict essentially when you need a maintenance, because it can happen anytime. Like, you're still not there. Like even as an AI expert, I cannot claim that we can predict. So what we do really, we do a lot of pre-positioning. So we have so much data from your property inspection report. We're the first company to digitize that. And we have so much external data and internal data that we're continuously collecting. And we'll be able to pre-position the homeowner and service providers when they need home maintenance. You already exchange so much information. So they don't have to re-enter their home address. They don't have to tell a lot about what kind of home they have, single family home or condominium, how many square footage. We already know all these things. And that is a huge efficiency gain right there. It's a huge communication gain right there. So it takes about 60 seconds or less to submit a maintenance request. You wake up in the morning, you see something is broken, you open the Dobby app. We are also Alexa compatible, so you can basically submit something.
Oh, awesome.
Voice. But then you submit that request, it takes 60 seconds, and we get that request, and then we dispatch that to one of our high quality providers. High quality providers from their side, they get that request. They already know where is the home. They already know the details, and it has a smart scheduling. So scheduling is a big component, by the way.
Okay.
Who is as we all know that we are waiting for someone and that person is not coming.
Yeah.
So what to solve that problem, we really use some optimized scheduling system, and that allows them to schedule very fast. And that increase the user experience tenfold, 20-fold. So that's that. And then the job specification. Sometimes you think you need an electrician, but you actually need an HVAC specialist. So when you have that conversation using our platform, we can actually assign the right pro. So no one is wasting their time as such. And then finally, you can have a very clear discussion on pricing. That has to be transparent, that has to be fair. So you can have a discussion on those things. And finally, you can pay with a click of a button. So that's kind of the whole journey. And now is the best part. It's the Carfax for home. Historically, you'll be saving paper receipts. And if you ever sell this home, it's a nightmare. What we do, we are collecting all these interaction, every single data point. That's why we are the AI first company. We are very strategic about data acquisition. And we have all this data. So that has two immediate value. It allows us to build smarter product continuously. It's a virtuous cycle. We add value, get data, add more value, get more data, and so on. But the second thing for a homeowner, you also, if you ever sell that home, you get a higher value for that home because you have everything much organized. So your seller's disclosure and everything is becoming much faster and much better, right? So because your competing home in the neighborhood, they don't have all these things organized. So that's why I say smarter homeowners are choosing it. And Americans sell their home in every 7 years. If you're a first-time buyer, then that number is 3 years. So it is a huge value to organize that data also. So these are the two main components, how we can increase the home value as your asset, and how we can give you that luxury experience, zero-touch experience for your home maintenance.
Yeah, very interesting. So is there some element of prediction? And the reason I ask this is because we always hear about in the industrial industry, right? Predictive maintenance is the killer app, right? So is there some element that, where you'd be able to predict maybe when there'll be a failure of something within the home? I know you're not putting sensors in people's homes, but I'm curious if that is part of the system today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. By the way, we are actually integrated with Alexa. We are integrated with Google Home and Samsung Home, because these two are like the open API. So we already did those integration. However, we started in the DC market. We are growing extremely fast right now. Month over month is we are growing rapidly, right? However, we have not seen yet that people are super fan of those. People are big fan of property inspection report digitization, right?
Okay.
So we do a AI-driven property inspection. We see tremendous popularity of that feature. However, we haven't seen that, people are still looking for home automation as such. However, as a founder, I strongly believe that is one of the key areas for the future. It would be everywhere, really. And so, look, Dobby gets smarter over time. Right. So we collect all this data, and we are essentially telling you using the longitudinal data that you know what, you live in Alexandria, that is a neighborhood of DC, and it is a high flood area. So you should be aware of these things. So it's not really advanced machine learning yet, because if you talk to any AI expert and someone building an AI first company ground up, they are not going to deploy an AI model in the day one because you don't have any data.
Right.
What you really do very smartly, you create an architecture engineering wise, and you create an architecture in the value wise that will allow you to collect data. And that like eventually will be more developing models. So we're in a huge advantage of be able to develop a fast hardcore machine learning model very early, because we are collecting data in a massive rate, right? But that's kind of where it is. But right now what we're really doing is a simple logic, rule-based models that is adding tremendous value to the homeowner, and they're sticking with Dobby. And they're allowing us to get to see a lot of data, which will allow us to build better products for them. So the key line I would give you as a takeaway is Dobby is getting smarter over time.
Okay. Very interesting. And then you mentioned the key market today is Washington, D.C. Are there other markets? Are you going to focus there right now, or are there other markets you plan to expand to?
Right. So we are very disciplined startup. So we understand that we took a very big problem. And so what we are really doing is that we are believing in geo rollouts, right? So that means we take one geography, and for us, that is Washington, D.C. metro area. That means not only D.C., but you are also taking substantial part of Maryland and Virginia. And it is one of the best home market. I think 5 of the top 10 richest counties here. So you have enormous number of home and homeowners, and the market is growing rapidly. We don't have any high risk as such in terms of geography. So people are choosing this area as a homeowner. So what we are really doing, we are focusing on this area with high intensity, and we are not looking at other geography at this point. In the next few months, we are basically essentially getting the playbook. And the playbook for the geo rollout, that means 3 things. That means, okay, this is basically the entire product vision, and we got it completely right by interacting with our early customers. So we know what problem we are solving, but what are the core features that they're looking for? What are the things that is most useful to service providers, to homeowners? How to grow the homeowners, how to grow the service providers, and an entire go-to-market strategy that we can very easily, and a distribution strategy that we can easily replicate to other geography. The best part of home maintenance and this business is that there is no regulatory variances. Like, I mean, if you think about Uber is very difficult for geo rollout because every geography has their own rule. But in our space, all that we have to figure out is that the product, we're a product-led company, and really zeroing on the product by applying this heavily on a single geography, which is very vibrant. And then we can take that playbook to anywhere very rapidly.
Okay. And, I'm curious about the early, I guess it is the early days, but, the founding team. Obviously, you yourself have an extensive background in AI, machine learning, working with data. How did you establish the founding team and the folks that you decided to take this journey with?
Absolutely. So I always say that we are a full stack team of world-class experts, right? So I believe in functional team. Functional teams mean everyone is focusing on a given function, and they are the CEO of their core function, right? And that always works like magic. And now after seed round, we are growing our team rapidly, but we are not growing recklessly. We are growing in a way that what work we have to do in order to get our next milestone, and we basically do milestone-based hire. Right. So that's essentially the very key of why I'm bringing this up, because the health of the team and the culture of the company depends on how you hire. Like you basically build a team, you build a company. Right. So the way we have designed that, we understood that there are 2 core areas. We have product, engineering, and data science, group number 1. And then you have operations, growth and marketing. So that's kind of how we approach this problem. So when we just started, we got Helen from Uber, who joined me as a co-founder, and she's leading our channel partnerships, how we work with agents and inspectors. Then we have Emma, who joined us from Clinton Foundation. I worked at Twitter. She was sales at Heineken, and she represented Botswana in the international platform. So she's truly that very rare breed of community builders. So she is the reason why we are growing our service provider site so rapidly, and how we are doing so well in the customer success. And then we have an incredible engineering team. At Data Robot, we have 300 people team in Ukraine. And so now we're actually using that playbook. So right now we have 3 engineers in the founding team, Benjamin, Yuri, and Olena. And now we are growing that team to 9 engineers very rapidly, all high quality. Like today I completed 2 hires. One person had a master's in cryptography. Another person worked in a gaming industry. So it's incredible, like, how rapidly we are, and high quality people are joining us in the engineering side. So really summarized, right now we are looking for someone who'd be helping us with the marketing, our first core hardcore marketing hire. And then also we are looking for another growth operator would be helping us to grow rapidly in different sections.
Right, very interesting. And so I think you mentioned 2 other co-founders. Had you met prior to, did you meet in the process of building the company and see, hey, this is an interesting profile, I should reach out? What was that dynamic like?
Right. Formally speaking, like there are 2 co-founders, me and Helen, but like, the whole team is kind of the founding team. And in true sense, why so? Because going back to your answer, like I started the company as an immigrant. So it was kind of a very interesting journey. I got early funding from Techstars and Plug and Play, both of these like accelerators or venture cap. They actually knew me before from Data Robot. So I started the company in 2019 and formally. And then right after Data Robot, and then I reached out to Helen when she was leaving Uber after 6 years. That was by the end of 2019. And then she joined me. By that time, we already won TechCrunch topic in AI ML. Like we had the product, but we did a lot of customer interactions, but we really did not start the revenue yet. So she really helped us to kickstart the product and etc. in the DC market with friends, family, and starting from the community. And then Emma joined right after, like in January, February time. And then we had a full team to really go aggressively in the DC market. And now we are growing extremely fast. And the engineering team joined me very early. They joined me from day 0, honestly. Olena joined very recently in January, and she's leading the front end. But Benjamin is with me from day 1, and he is leading the back end and core engineering side. So summarizing everything. So in my case, I started the company myself, but then you cannot start a company or do anything alone. So you have to get the right people. And so I was very lucky to get a very good founding team put together. And it is an iterative process. It did not happen like at once. Like it is not that magically I got all of these people. That there were some false starts, and there was I always like to talk about failures, and there were some wrong hires and there was some wrong fit, but we kept going and kept everything kind of what is our focus. And now we have a very solidified team, and now we are going very well.
Yeah. And what I think is interesting there is, as a startup, right, you always have limited resources, particularly before you raise your first substantial round. So you have to be mindful of how you can acquire and deploy resources economically. What you mentioned is really leveraging a global team, right? And in your case, engineers, and you had exposure to this market in Ukraine, right? When we work with startups, generally it's kind of folks who are based in LATAM that have a similar engineering skill set. But what I want to get at is this thought, all right, well, let's look at the global market as it relates to scaling our talent pool. Is that something you learned? I think you mentioned you learned that at Data Robot, but was that something that you intended to implement from day 1 with Dobby, or it was kind of out of necessity that you had to expand and look at other areas for talent?
Great question. So Dobby, I knew that from day 1, right? Before even started the company, that's what I'm going to do. But look, globalization is very, AIG is a classic example of truly global company. So if you know the history of AIG, it was like, my God, it is kind of like a pioneer of the globalization, right? So globalization is not new. That, okay, you are basically going to other places, and India, where I'm originally from, there is a huge market of what we call outsourcing. What I learned at Data Robot is fundamentally different, that you are not really outsourcing. By the way, I have seen a little bit of this at Deloitte, what I'm going to say, which is you don't outsource. You basically create an office in that location.
Right.
And you may, legally speaking, still have the contracting relationship and all this, but for every practical purposes, you have to treat it as your own team. You have to give them autonomy. You have to put that trust. And what I really learned at Data Robot from Jeremy, Data Robot CEO, is that he would be going to Singapore, he would be going to Datadog was truly global. It is in Boston. I always work from Washington, DC, by the way. So it was not only global internationally, but it was also global nationally. It was from day one, by the way. Okay, so our chief engineer was in Singapore, chief engineer was in Austria, chief data scientist was in Singapore, head of sales, Reach was in Philly or Pennsylvania, and so on, right? So it's kind of what I learned from Jeremy is that he's going to all these locations and he's spending time with people.
Right.
Okay? That's very important. So that's the playbook that I used. I basically went to Ukraine 7 times or 8 times or something like that. And really, the Twilio CEO is coming back with a book called Listen to Your Developers or something like that. You should always, if you build a tech company, you have to build friendship and you have to learn from your engineers. So I spent that time with our engineers really upfront and listen to them, how we are building the team and etc. It has a huge ROI because right now we are doing all this hire. I can really trust them and they are doing it so rapidly. And the whole thing is happening very, very right with high quality and with speed. And that is happening because they are the integral part of the team. And that's kind of if you ask me about the playbook, that is the playbook. So for Dobby, summarizing everything, for Dobby, I knew that I will be starting with a global team. But I also knew that if I want to do this right, I cannot have a contracting global team where I'm outsourcing work to them. It has to be truly integrated with the core team. That has to be our team, my team that I depend on, that I trust on. And that's basically something that we are doing fundamentally differently than many other companies.
Yeah, no, I think that's very smart, a very smart way to go about things, obviously, but maybe I'm a bit biased here. But also, just the fact that you went out there so that you could meet the actual folks who would be at least starting to build that team. So very interesting. And then is that, as you think about going forward, is that still going to be a part of the playbook or, what are the plans?
The plan is to have both team, right? So Datadog did it a little differently because it kind of pioneered the whole practice as a company. Google always had a team in Ukraine, right? So all the large companies used to have team in Ukraine, but for us, so every company is different. And we started our company, right now we are operating in 2020. So what we are doing is essentially for the next few months, we'll be keeping the whole engineering team in Ukraine. But as soon as we about to start our Series A, we'll start building the team here. If you happen to know a great CTO or chief engineering or something like that, or we'll be happy to talk to that person because it's like the healthy team is essentially you have both team. You have a team here and you have team outside. Mm-hmm. And there are multiple reasons for that. It's another core idea of diversity. And we are doing extremely good in having a team that is well balanced in any way and shape or form you look at it. And that is the whole idea, that you have team here and you have team there. So we'll be growing both team rapidly up to Series A. So that's kind of the plan.
Okay, awesome. And one of the things I liked it because what you're talking about is more. It's not necessarily outsourcing; it's remote work talent, right?
Absolutely.
And now today, virtually everyone is working remotely. What I like to think about with our talent here is that everyone is on the same time zone. If it's if the client is in the US, so it changes the dynamics a bit. But what I would love to know from your experience in having remote work talent is, what are some of the ways to make it work efficiently, right? And especially because you started off like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing we already discussed is how to make it work interpersonally, right? You have to give that ownership to the team that is remote. And it's true for nationally also. So if we are headquartered in Washington, DC, but we'll be growing our team, maybe there would be some people in New York. New York is a very good talent pool right there, right? It's just 3 hours or less than 3 hours. You can very easily work back and forth between New York and DC. So you have to give the ownership to the non-headquarter location. That's number one. That's more interpersonal. Efficiency is a very important point, the areas that you are bringing. You have a huge advantage with your company because they're on the same time zone. Now, if I go to Ukraine, I have also another kind of advantage with Ukraine, which is our engineers can work uninterruptedly for the first several hours of the day. Then US wakes up and now we are doing back and forth with them. So engineers require uninterrupted time. So that way, that strategy is very good. But if I work with Latin America, then I would be selling people that, hey, when you are really bored with winter, you can go there and for the summer, and spend 1 week there and work with your engineers and come back, right? So you have to be really creative and bring the human part in all these things and really ask the question, what will optimize the success of the company? And we are, again, as I said, we are living, we are one of the luckiest generation, the kind of technology we have. I was very skeptical about remote working when I joined it because I was at AIG and everything was kind of more legacy. I'd be working from the Wall Street office and all this. I was so impressed with, we have Slack, we have Hangout, we have Zoom, we have so many things. And you pick up your phone, you have FaceTime, so many ways to communicate with people that right now it's a no-brainer that we have to have a remote team. So the efficiency point of view is to adopt as many technology, give people selection. Don't impose something to them. You have to use WebEx. No, give people selection and also share the best practices with them. And also create a very good sanitization, which is, yes, we are always online, but that does not mean we can interrupt each other all the time. So give that space is also important, which is becoming an increasing problem in the remote work right now, because we're always on Zoom and things like that. So keeping that balance, we are all evolving. That would be the biggest thing about the efficiency.
Yeah. And I love this conversation because I think a couple of other really great examples of companies that have done it well is like Zapier. For example, or there's another company out of East Coast. Is it TextJar, SkillJar? Anyway, they do sales tax. They help companies take care of their sales taxes. But I just really think it's interesting when you start from day one with remote work. Obviously, there's certain benefits, but then it's different than what we're used to. So then you have to figure out how to make it work, not just technologically, but culturally, right?
That's right.
So very, very interesting there. Also, what I love to learn more about is your background is interesting in that you had the ML AI experience. So maybe there were fewer learning lessons relative to someone who doesn't have that experience. But as you think about an AI startup and what you've learned over time, everything you know today, if you can go back and advise yourself of some things that you could do to be more productive, more efficient from day one, are there certain things that you could pick at and identify and say, hey, look, here are the one or two things you should think about right now?
No, that's, I think, you're ultimately building a product for users and customers, right? So having these, most of the data scientists are inward focused. They are most of the time, it is a huge generalization I'm doing, but I'm a data scientist. I think I have a right to do that. Your natural tendency would be behind a computer, in front of a computer, not behind the computer, but in front of a computer, right? So at DataRobot, we used to say customer facing data scientist. We use that because DataRobot was founded by data scientists. We knew that we have to impose that customer facing term to highlight that your job is to talk to customers, right? So that is, I think, a very big complementing skill set. I happen to have interest in people, the way I grew up and what really get me excited. So that was my advantage beyond, I love numbers and people at the same time. Yeah. But what I continuously remind myself, and when I observe myself, I see that I am happiest when I'm talking to a customer. Okay. I'm not happiest when investor said, okay, here is the check. I am happy, but the happiest quotient goes really high, almost bringing tears in your eyes when you see that you have built something that strangers are using. You don't know these people, but I see that, oh, they're the users and they're just using Dobby and they're happy about it. So I think the biggest thing that we have to really understand that you don't have a data if you don't add value. Every data company you see on the planet, they are adding tremendous value first, then they earn data. So you add value, you earn data, and you create that virtuous cycle, which Elon Musk often talked about energy positive. The meaning of energy positive in our business world is that how can you create a virtuous cycle which brings your customer acquisition cost to zero with an infinite lifetime value, right? The only way to do that, Amazon, Jeff Bezos is a classic example of that they started adding value, getting data, adding more value, getting more data. And now the loop, we call it flywheel. The flywheel is happening without pushing any external energy into it. So that should be the goal of any AI first founder or CEO, that how can we focus in a way that we are adding tremendous value without thinking too much about the machine learning or AI in the beginning. If we do that right, then automatically you have enormous opportunity to apply AI and machine learning. So that's kind of one thing that I was very lucky to understand that circumstantial way, but I would definitely share that advice with every founder.
Okay, awesome. And last couple quick fire questions.
Yeah.
What is your favorite tool as an AI startup? What's been your favorite tool to use?
As an AI startup, like, oh, Data Robot has to be, because I'm tremendously biased. No, like, I mean, truth be told, like, the AI tool is Data Robot, definitely. But I use, like, Excel a lot. Excel means Google Sheet. Basically, we are using that right now. But these two should do most of the job. So all the financial models and everything, we usually use all the open, like, and then Data Robot for the AI.
Okay. Any leaders in AI or in business generally that you love to listen to, that you love to hear their words of wisdom?
Right. So someone I don't know personally, but I love to listen to, like, this already, Robert Smith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he come from engineering background and he became a business person. So
Right.
when that happened, I want more data scientists to start business, because when that happens, you look at business in a very different way. So one of the things, like my silent, like, he's like a role model, because he
Yeah.
was a chemical engineer and then he joined Goldman Sachs. Now he has Vista Equity. So that journey is very fascinating. So these are the two, like, Jeremy is more like, he's a personal friend and the mentor. He's helping me in every possible way. But Robert Smith is a classic example where I just listen to him and learn a lot. I just observe him and learn a lot as an audience. So these two people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also one that I can relate
Here
to. For
too.
me,
Yep.
it started as being someone as an investor and wanting to be a tech private equity mogul, I should say,
Right.
and then moving into technology. But I can definitely relate to you on that. Satadru, this has been a very enlightening conversation, very helpful getting your perspective, both from an enterprise to a startup, and then even drilling into how to think about building vertical software in an intelligent way. Thanks for joining us today. And lastly, I wanted you to, if you could name the website where we can find you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Darius. First of all, to having this conversation. This was absolutely a pleasure. Our website is hellodobby.com. So you can just search Dobby maintenance, it will pop up, or Hello Dobby, HELLODOBBY.com. So you will you'll get a tremendous amount of information, can learn about the story and the people on our website.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Satadru.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.